would be an ideal chance for a surprise strike.
Now, you're the prey.
Hey guys, MrPokke here, back with another video, and on today's episode of Early Access Review, we are going to be taking a look at Qingyi from Zenless Zone Zero in the Creator Experience Program. The Creator Experience Program, they are not going to be indicative of the final products, and there may be changes in the live version, right? So we're going to be talking about Qingyi's kit, how exactly does she work, her drive discs, her W engines, her team comps, and without further ado, let's get into today's content.
Subscribe!
So jumping straight into exactly what Qingyi does, she is a S-rank electric stun agent, or rather specifically, her role in the team comp is to build up our days meter. You could have seen this from our other units such as NB, Lycon, and Koleda, and she is going to be our very first limited stun unit in Zenless Zone Zero. Qingyi as a stun unit, I would say that she is pretty much a very on-field stun unit. You really want to make her be on the field as much as possible, especially before the enemy is dazed, right? Before the enemy is stunned. Then you swap into your main DPS and unload its absolute highest damage capabilities, right? So it shouldn't be a very unfamiliar concept. Before you actually daze the enemy target, she doesn't really do a lot of damage, especially with her core talent, right? So most of the time, you are going to be using your dazer on the field like 90% of the time before the target is stunned. After the target is done, then you swap back into Zhuyuan, swap the supporting line of stuff, and then you deal the absolute highest damage. Qingyi essentially perfectly synergized with units like Zhuyuan or any kind of units that does burst DPS to break the enemy as fast as possible because they want to be on the field as much as they can. And then once the enemy is broken, you swap with your DPS and the cycle kind of repeats itself, right? So that is essentially the overall summary of how Qingyi works. Now, going into her Curvator kit, basic attack is gonna be where majority of her days multiplier is gonna be coming from, right? She has 4 separate hits. The first 2 hits, not that important. Third basic attack is where you guys have seen from the animations. She essentially stays on the ground. She will not move anywhere, and she will repeatedly slap her stuff on the floor, creating this field of electricity. Any enemy unit within this field will receive daze damage. Qingyi can stay in this state permanently. As long as you keep pressing your attack button, be it your X button or your M1, you can stay here pretty much forever. However, that is not the way you want to play Qingyi, right? You don't want her to stay in this stage forever because that is not where most of the days is going to be coming from. The absolute highest days damage from Qingyi is going to be from her enhanced AV attack. So the purpose of using this third basic attack animation, which is stay on the ground as much as you can to spam up this electricity, is to build up this flash connect gauge you can see on the top left hand corner. As long as your flash connect gauge reaches 75% and above, you can then use your enhanced AV attack. This is where Qingyi does a majority of her days multipliers. At level 12, it does come with a 734.8 days multiplier, as well as a pretty considerable 1686.8% attack multiplier, right? Whether you use this at 75% or 100%, it doesn't matter that much. Although that being said, the more you charge up towards 100%, it will buff your days and attack multipliers by 0.5 and 1% respectively, right? Even though that might be a good thing, this skill is pretty reactive because it has this special ability where during your Enchanted Moonlit Blossom animation, where you're using this enhanced heavy attack by pressing and holding, you can actually dash when an enemy attacks you to instantly do a perfect dodge, and it will cut into the final attack, damaging the enemy. And this is going to be very useful, especially when you're against high pressure scenarios when the enemies are hitting you a lot, as well as the fact that it kind of ties back into one of the core talents, which we're going to be talking about later on, right? So this is going to be the majority of how you are going to be using Qingyi. You will spam your third basic attack, right? Your 3 basic attack, build up your flash connect, get it as close to 100% as you can, and you either let it go at 100% or you let it go whenever the enemy is about to hit you. Cast your Enchanted Moonlit Blossom by pressing and holding your attack button and letting go of this animation, following which the cycle just kind of repeats itself, right? So that will basically be Qingyi's basic attack. The fourth basic attack, which comes after the third basic attack, if for some reason you're not using your Flash Connect, there's two different variations. The first one is if you only use a very short third basic attack, it will just be a very simple slamming your rod on the floor. But if it was to charge up to the point where you see a little flash when you're in the third basic attack, Qingyi will jump into the air and then do a little bit more damage, right? And of course, after this animation, you can then chain into your Flash Connect Enchanted Moonlit Blossom. Her normal heavy attack, Qingyi is not going to be using this if at all. You pretty much will never want to use this unless you have the Enchanted heavy attack from your 75% and above Flash Connect, right? Then jumping into Qingyi's skill, Sunlit Glory / Moonlit Begonia. The normal version of the skill, it is kind of the same as your normal version of the heavy attack. You're pretty much never going to use it. It doesn't help you chain into your third basic attack animation. You do want to use this for the enhanced skill, which costs 60 energy to 80 energy, because this will allow you to instantly begin your third basic attack animation, which is the Electric Field. So it is kind of reminiscent of Ellen's skill, where after casting Ellen's skill, you can instantly cut into Ellen's third and fourth basic attack animation, do the ice spin, right? So it's kind of the same concept for Qingyi. Use her skill as like a basic attack cancel in order to make you enter into Qingyi's third basic attack as much as you can. It is not that recommended to use the enhanced skill in my personal experience because it costs 80 energy instead of 60, and I realized that the damage multiplier is not that big of a difference. I'd rather use this skill as more instances to enter into our third basic animation in order to trigger more Flash Connect and trigger our Enchanted Moonlit Blossom, all that kind of stuff, right? Her dodge counter is also like her EX skill, which is after performing a dodge counter, Qingyi can instantly cut into the third basic attack animation again. So you can kind of see that Qingyi's kit as a whole, it really ties into entering your third basic attack animation, where you start spamming on the floor with your lightning field and then casting your Enchanted Moonlit Blossom when you achieve 75% and above Flash Connect, right? So that is kind of like how her kit kind of ties together. And also keep in mind that this dodge counter can also have a pretty decent 366% days multiplier, slightly lower than Koleda's 434, slightly higher than Lycon's 252, right? Another thing is, during your animation when you're in the electric field, your basic attack tree, where you're only gonna be immobile on the floor, you can't move, you can also dodge during this animation. And once you finish dodging and perform a dodge counter, it then goes back into the electric field again. So you can see that Qingyi, she can stay in this quote-unquote electric field animation for a very long period of time, as long as you can just keep dodging the enemy attacks, right? So shouldn't have that much of an issue when trying to build the Flash Connect drive. For Qingyi's parry, it is slightly higher than Lycon and Koleda at 514.4% days multiplier instead of their 491.2%, making her having the highest days counter or days parry in the entire game. Not by a very significant margin, but just a good to know, right? Also, speaking of Flash Connect, yes, you can only get your Flash Connect stacks from casting electric damage, right? The actual Enchanted Moonlit Blossom itself, however, will not give you any Flash Connect stacks. And then Qingyi's ultimate is pretty much never going to be using this because as per our current team building, I've been playing Zenizone Zero for a while, you are almost always going to be using your ultimate for your main DPS, right? So your units are support and days units, they are pretty much never going to be using their ultimates because the decibel ratings in this game, they are shared amongst all 3 units, right? So this skill, you don't really need to care about it that much, although the animation is pretty cool. And finally, talking about Qingyi's core skill, which is the icing on the cake that kind of just ties all of the kit together, right? So, Qingyi's core skill, Eternal Seasons. When she lands a finishing strike on an enemy with basic attack Enchanted Moonlit Blossom, the finishing strike is the final thrust she does with a rod towards the flurry of the very final hit. If you hit an enemy with this, it will apply 5 stacks of subjugation to the enemy, stacking up to 20 times, right? 20 stacks. Each stack increases our stun damage multiplier by 3%, which means it goes up to a 60% stun damage multiplier increase. For comparison, Lycon is a 35% stun damage multiplier increase, right? So this for Qingyi is going to be at 60% additional, which means that your normal days multiplier or stun multiplier when the enemy is going to be stunned, it goes from a 150% to a whopping 210%, which is very, very bogus at max stacks, right? At max stacks. For each rush attack during basic attack Enchanted Moony Blossom, the finishing strike will also apply an extra stack of subjugation, which is basically another way of saying applying more stacks, right? If perfect dodge is triggered when using finishing strike, which is what I mentioned just now, it is kind of part of Qingyi's kit to use your dodges whenever you are in combat with the enemy. Also directly apply 10 stacks of subjugation. And when you apply subjugation to any normal or elite enemies, the applied stacks are also doubled. So this kind of tells you as a player that for most scenarios, it can be relatively easy to get this maximum 20 stacks. Subjugation stacks, they do not expire until you actually stun the enemy. They pretty much last forever until you stun. So basically, whenever you break whenever you stun an enemy with Qingyi, you are pretty much always going to be getting this 60% multiplier more or less, right? And when the target is recovered from being stunned, then the corresponding stacks of subjugation will then reset. So this core skill is kind of what makes Qingyi one of, if not the most universal stun units that we have in our current moment, because, you know, stun damage multiplier is always going to be one of, if not the best sources of damage increase compared to the likes of like attack percentage buffs, damage percentage buffs, so on and so forth, right? So very, very good core skill and very, very universal. Pretty much can fit with any DPS. And finally, our additional ability, 3 verses of Farewell at Yang Pass, activates when there is one attack type unit or unit from the same faction. Basic attack deals 20% increased days, and if Qingyi's impact is greater than 120, each point over increases the attack by 6 up to a maximum of 600. I would say that this additional ability is not that important, because especially at the early game to mid game when players don't really have very good gears, your Qingyi is likely not going to be dealing incredible amounts of damage. Marginally increases the personal damage. Qingyi is a on-field stun unit, right? She wants to be on field as much as can. So unlike the other stun units, you can see that one of the problems when you're playing like shield defense, critical nodes, is that if you let your days unit be on the field majority of the time, especially if they're not invested properly, you have a very, very heavy damage downtime, because your days units pretty much just do no damage. Then one last thing, her 6 different tiny little core skills is a plus base attack by 25, 25, 25, as well as a plus a base impact by 6, 6, and 6, right? So basically an 18 impact and 75 base attack, right? So that's gonna be that. And that will pretty much wrap it up for Qingyi's character kit. Alright, jumping into some W engine. So Qingyi's signature W engine, Ice Jade Teapot. Alright, jumping into Qingyi's W engine, Ice Jade Teapot. When a base attack hits an enemy, gains 1 stack of Terrific. Every stack of Terrific increase impact by 0.7% up to 30 times, lasting 8 seconds, which basically translates into a 21% increased impact for our user, right? The duration of each stack is calculated separately, and upon acquiring a stack, if the equiper possesses more or equal to 15 stacks, our entire team's damage increased by 20% for 10 seconds, and passive of the same effect do not stack. So this is honestly a pretty universal W engine for almost every single impact character, because as long as your basic attack hits an enemy, you'll gain this stack. And then once you gain this stack, it will buff up your impact, which means it can be applied to both your skills, your basic attack, your dodge counters, all the counters. It will apply this impact to your entire kit itself. But one thing to consider is that slower attack speed units such as Koleda might have a little bit of a difficulty bringing these stacks up to par, right? It is only when a basic attack hits an enemy, then you get a Terrific, right? So when you're using your skills, the Lycon skill, Koleda skills, that's not going to count as a stack. So this is definitely going to be Qingyi's best in slot W engine, because as we see from her basic attack tree animation, you basically have a infinite basic attack spam. Just blah, 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 blah. You're pretty much always going to be spamming on basic attack much faster than any of the other impact units that we've seen so far. So definitely going to be perfectly fitting for Qingyi. Very, very easily get the full 30 stacks, get the buffs, get everything right. If you don't want to run IJ Teapot, so here are some of the alternatives. For Hellfire gears, which is going to be Koleda's gear, Qingyi might not benefit from this as much, because she inherently wants to be on the field as much as she can. So the first line, when all field, the equiper's energy regen increases, it might not even have that much of an art time for Qingyi, unless for those rare moments where you are either like dodging or parrying, or during a stage where the enemy is dazed and you're using your main DPS to do damage, right? So in this kind of situations, then you get slightly higher energy generation. That means that the second line is honestly pretty good. Whenever you use the EX special attack, increase impact by 10% for 10 seconds, up to 2 times, and duration is calculated separately. Both Koleda and Qingyi have 60 energy, so this second line will be pretty good. And the main stat is an impact percentage main stat, so it's also a pretty good alternative, right? Otherwise, Lycon's W engine, the restraint, honestly, in my opinion, it fits Qingyi better because the effect is when an attack hits an enemy, damage and days from basic attacks increase by 6 for 8 seconds up to 5 times, which is a 30% additional days from our basic attacks, right? And this also includes our enhanced heavy basic attack, right? So Qingyi's entire kit, most of the days, is coming from a basic attack. So this restrained W engine fits her very, very nicely. If you do not have any of the S rank W engines, some of the A ranks such as the Mara Battery Mark, I think it is a very, very good alternative. Increase electric damage, and when the equipment hits an enemy with a dodge counter or assist attack, increase energy regeneration. Impact main stat, same as the previous two W engines. I think if you don't really have much to use, as long as this is a free one that everybody has, it is a very, very good alternative, and it kind of just gets a good job done, right? So there it is. Otherwise, another decent A rank is going to be the 6 shooter, which is the Battle Pass W engine. The equipment gains a charge every 3 seconds up to 6 times, which is up to a 24% increased additional days. Keep in mind that it does take 18 seconds to get the full stacks, and from the testing that I've done, most of the time you are already going to be breaking the enemy target within 18 seconds. I would say even within 12-13 seconds, you would have already dazed the enemy unit. So it is not likely that you are going to get the full benefits from the impact 6 shooter. But that being said, the impact main stat is always going to be nice to have. So very, very good alternative, right? So that's going to be that for Qingyi's W engines. Now let's talk about Qingyi's drive disc. And this is very, very straightforward. So it's going to be a very short section. 4+2 Shock Star Disco plus Swing Jazz, 4-piece impact, 2-piece energy duration. This is pretty much the best in slot 4+2. The 4-piece for Shock Star Disco, increase impact by 6%, and basic attack, dash attack, dodge counter, inflict 20% more days. Definitely best in slot. No other set can kind of fit her. Qingyi makes use of this perfectly. Pretty much built for her almost. You're definitely going to be running this 4-piece. And the 2-piece energy regeneration is going to be the most universal one for more flexible and smooth rotations. For your main stats and subsets, main stat first, in the early game, your slot 4 and slot 5, honestly, doesn't matter. Just run whatever you want. As long as your slot 6 is on impact, then you are good to go. Energy regeneration, in my experience, it is not as important compared to impact, especially when you consider the fact that Qingyi, majority of where her impact is going to be coming from is the basic attack tree as well as the enhanced heavy attack, the enchanted Moonlit Blossom, right? So that's going to be that. In the late game though, however, if you want to build a Qingyi that does more damage on field, then you can definitely consider more offensive main stats such as your crit rate, crit damage main stats, or your electric damage main stat from slot 4 and slot 5 respectively, right? This would not hurt her. In fact, this would definitely benefit Qingyi, since Qingyi is an on-field dazer, like I've mentioned plenty of times previously. So if she's gonna be on-field most of the time, then you might as well just give her more offensive main stats and subsets to make her deal more damage on field. Another consideration players might think is gonna be anomaly proficiency for slot 4, just so that Qingyi does take on the short debuff quite nicely. And if you're going to be running her with future anomaly units such as Jane Doe, then this might be pretty decent. But that being said, because we want to run Qingyi with a impact percentage slot 6, that means we are going to be missing out on anomaly mastery, right? So take that into consideration. In my experience, I think running Qingyi on crit, especially towards the late game, end game, is going to be a lot better. For the subsets, very, very straightforward. Double crit, or if you want to go anomaly, you can go for the anomaly proficiency, and then over attack percentage, right? Although Qingyi is a dazer, there are no daze subsets. There's no impact subsets, there's no speed subsets, there's no energy regeneration subsets. So the only subset you have in Zen Zone 0, they're pretty much either HP attack defense or the offensive like crit rate, crit damage, or the kind of stuff, right? So you might as well just give Qingyi more crit rate, crit damage just to improve her overall personal damage, especially when she's a on-field dazer. And keep in mind that Qingyi, she does have very, very decent multipliers, really fast rotations, and an innate offensive buzz, especially when you consider her core talent, which buffs her up to 600 additional attack, right? So that is going to be that for Qingyi's drive discs. Very, very straightforward. Then moving on to her Mindscapes. For Qingyi's Mindscapes, the most notable one is going to be 1, 2, as well as 6, right? Installation breakdown. When you enter combat, Flash Connect is instantly at max 100%, and the accumulation is increased by 30%, which means that you charge this Flash Connect 30% faster. And when you're using your base attack Enchanted Moonlit Blossom, which is the enhanced heavy attack, if Flash Connect voltage is at maximum, which is only 100%, attacks will reduce the defense of the enemy by 15%. And Qingyi's crit rate against the enemy will increase by 20% for 15 seconds. This Mindscape 1 is honestly very, very universal, especially if you consider her with a defense down stacking ally such as Nicole, which just so happen to be Zhu Yuan's best in soft support as of this current moment, right? So with a 40% defense down, adding this on, that's gonna hit us a 55% defense down. And as you guys know by now, defense down scaling, the more you stack on, the more it scales, right? So I can see this performing exceptionally well, especially with units like Zhu Yuan and Nicole on the same team, right? The 20% crit rate for Qingyi, in the early game, you might not even feel the difference because your Qingyi is probably not gonna be built like a DPS, but in the late game, when you actually give Qingyi enough like, offensive subsets, then this 20% crit rate will definitely make your life a lot easier when you want Qingyi to deal more damage when she's on field, right? So take that into consideration. Your Mindscape 2 minimal effort maximum impact, each stack of subjugation in the core passive increase the stun damage multiplier by 133% of its original value, which basically means it is a 4/3, right? So from 60% final total, you go from 80% final total, right? So instead of 210, it now go up to 230% stun damage multiplier. And when Qingyi attacks an enemy and the stacks are already at maximum, days increase by 15%, which means that if the target already has 20 stacks of subjugation from all of your enhanced CV attacks, then you can now apply this additional 15% more days for all your attacks, by the way, inclusive of skill, basic, enhanced basic, dodge, parry, all that kind of stuff. So you basically want to make the enemy days a lot quicker because of this 15% days, which can proc this additional stun multiplier a lot. Days faster, and during days, you do more damage. That is basically her Mindscape 2. Although at this point, I kind of want to bring up one topic, which is that sometimes dazing or stunning the enemy extremely fast, it might not always be beneficial, because you also want to consider that you want your main DPS, especially your main DPS and your supports, to have enough energy to cast their skills, or even have enough decibel ratings to cast their ultimates, right? If you break too fast and you have none of that, then it might be a little bit counterintuitive, right? So keep that into consideration. For your Mindscape 4 stable arc barrier, upon entering or exiting Flash Connect, you gain a shield equal to 10% of your max HP. If the previous shield is still active when the shield is refreshes, Qingyi regenerates 5 energy. This energy regeneration effect can only be triggered once every 10 seconds. Basically a comfort Mindscape. Make her a little bit tankier, get a little bit more energy, do more skills, connect into BA3, connect more Flash Connect, all that. So just a comfort Mindscape. And finally, Mindscape 6, 8 Meridians. Interrupt level of basic attack Enchanted Moonlit Blossom is greatly increased, which basically translates to increased poise. You're not gonna get knocked out, all that kind of stuff, especially if you have skill issues and you can't dodge enough, right? And the crit damage is increased by additional 100%. And when Qingyi hits an enemy with the Enchanted Moonlit Blossoms, the target's resistance to all attribute damage is reduced by 20% for 15 seconds. This is basically all type res down by 20% for 15 seconds. And as you guys have seen from Honkai Starbucks and Xenon Zone Zero, res down debuffs, they are one of, if not the strongest debuffs that we have in the game as of right now, right? So this Mindscape skill is definitely going to make Qingyi an absolute powerhouse when it comes to increasing our team-wide damage, as well as improving our own damage with this absolutely massive 100% crit damage buff to the Enchanted Moonlit Blossoms. At this point, you can just kind of run with any team and it's going to work, right? Although that being said, even at Mindscape 0, Qingyi can already be ran into pretty much any sort of day teams. Which kind of brings me to one of our final segments, which is gonna be Qingyi's team comps. I tried with Zhu Yuan, I tried with Nico Mata, I tried with Erlen, and I felt that at the end of the day, I think Qingyi fundamentally just performs the best with Zhu Yuan, and it is not even by a close margin compared to any of our other days units. With that is to say, if you already have another days unit for a second team, be it Nico Mata, be it Erlen, be it whatever, and you have a Zhu Yuan, and now you're lacking one more slot for stun unit. If you give your Zhu Yuan Qingyi, this team is a completely different team. Qingyi drastically elevates the potential of a burst DPS such as Zhu Yuan, because Zhu Yuan's damage is very, very low when the enemy is not dazed. And Qingyi, she fills up this gap where Zhu Yuan wants to be off-field. Qingyi will now be on-field, dealing all of her days damage, her base attack tree, her flash connect, all that. She's pretty much one of, if not our fastest days units as of right now, compared to Lycon, Koleda, as well as NB, right? So because of this, Zhu Yuan's rotations speeds up drastically, especially when you know how to manage your bullets, manage your Nicole defense down. The damage with this team comp is absolutely out of this world. I would say that Zhu Yuan plus Qingyi, and I guess you want to add on Nicole, is a far stronger team compared to Erlen plus Lycon plus Sokaku. That's from my personal experience playing so far. This team is absolutely monstrous. Although it might not even be a surprise, since at the end of the day, it is 2 limited S-rank agents compared to 1 limited and 1 standard S-rank agent, right? That's gonna be that. Another thing that I've noticed is that for Qingyi, she doesn't synergize well with like units like Erlen, because Erlen is a on-field DPS. she can more or less maintain her damage even when she is on field because she doesn't have a very big burst window aside from when you use your skill, cast your flash freeze, and then you use your enhanced basic attack, all that kind of stuff, or you can use your ultimate, right? So compared to the likes of Zhu Yuan, Ellen is less synergistic with Qingyi. In fact, I would say that Ellen with Lycon still performs better than Ellen with Qingyi. We could say that Qingyi is a universal daze unit. You can run her with pretty much any assault unit, any attack unit. Her best in slot is definitely going to be main DPS that are considered the burst category. As of now, Zhu Yuan perfectly fits this category. Other units doesn't really fit it as much. Maybe we see more burst DPS units, who knows. Nico Mata, it kind of falls in the same camp as kind of like burst, because she has a very high damage from skills, her EX skills, whereas her basic attacks doesn't really do a lot of damage. So for Nico Mata, you kind of just want to make her stack up her energy and then you spam her skills, right? So she can also be considered a burst DPS if you want to consider like Soldier 11 as a on-field DPS, right? Soldier 11, she doesn't really have a very big burst window. You kind of want to time her flaming swords to deal the flame damage all the time, right? So if Ellen is Soldier 11, then Zhu Yuan is Nico Mata, but they are basically the enhanced version, right? So now another potential team comp that we probably need more testing with is Qingyi with anomaly units such as Jane Doe. So Jane Doe is going to be our physical anomaly unit that we're going to be releasing in the second half of version 1.1. And Qingyi is the same class as Jane Doe. They are both under the pub sec, right? So they can activate each other's passives, which means that we might be able to see Qingyi even in anomaly teams. So even though anomaly want to stack on all the anomaly debuffs, breaking the target earlier is not a bad thing as well, because all of the anomaly triggers, they can also benefit from the stun multiplier English, right? So that will need more testing in the future. My overall personal experience that I've had with Qingyi herself, I would say I'm very happy. She feels very smooth to play. She kind of reminds me of like Sun Wukong, like the Monkey King, where she uses a rod and just kind of steps over play. Very smooth, very clean. The perfect dodges when you're using the enchanted Moonlit Blossom feels very satisfying. Makes you feel like you're a god gamer. The parry timing, the dodge timings, they are quite generous. So especially players that are having issues like dodging all over the place. And I would say that her personal damage is also not something to be ignored. She does deal a pretty decent amount, although it's not as high compared to like an actual DPS. I think it's definitely a lot better compared to the likes of like Koleda or even Lycon, right? Going forward into the future, is Qingyi gonna be the standard, or rather is this burst DPS quick swapping into Qingyi gonna be the standard? Only time will tell, right? Because there is currently 3 main teams you can think of right now. One is the classic hyper carry, where she is a on-field DPS and you give her a lot of buffs. You have your Lycon Ice Shred, you have your Sokaku main DPS buff up this hyper carry and just make them be on the field like most of the time, get the job done, right? So that's gonna be our team 1. Our team 2 is pretty much the Zhu Yuan and Qingyi team, where you are quick swapping between burst DPS, on-field Dazer. Burst DPS, on-field Dazer versus on-field DPS, burst Dazer, right? So these two are gonna be the prominent types of team comp that I've seen. And the last team comp is gonna be the anomaly teams, which we still need more units to find out exactly how insane they are. As of now, it's just gonna be Grace, Rina. When Geno comes out, we'll see what's up. So that's gonna be that. Which team is gonna be the better team? Honestly, I can't tell. They all feel roughly the same, and it really depends on the overall playing experience of the player. If you feel better playing with an on-field DPS with a burst Dazer, go for it. If you feel better playing with a burst DPS and an on-field Dazer, also go for it, right? It really depends on which one feels better to you as a player. Alright, with that, we have pretty much come to the end of today's episode of Early Access Review featuring Qingyi. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. The word of the day is going to be STUN. The word of the day is going to be stun. Hope you guys enjoyed today's content. Join the Discord, join YouTube, join Twitch, and I'll see you guys on my stream. That's all I have for today. All the best for your team pools in the future, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.